Okay, folks, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started so that we can kind of run on time, and hopefully some of the participants will join us. I think that I sent out a reminder this morning, and I think there may have been a disconnect between like time zones is the other thing I'm thinking about, because when I looked at the registrations, a lot of them were like, you know, in other time zones. So I'm hoping that I thought Zoom like automatically adjusted that, but my message could have been confusing because my message said 3 p.m. So, you know, I put the EST on there, but sometimes it doesn't always work like that. So I'm going to take a quick pause and then I'll start for Pearson. Here we go. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Public Library of Mount Vernon, Ohio, and BreakBread Literacy Project, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm Jamie Lynn Smith, and I'm here with Alex Mainber and Mia Carranza from BreakBread Magazine. We're going to be writing and learning with Crystal A.C. Salas, our visiting writer and a stellar poet. And I'm really excited to welcome Crystal back to our creative classroom. So, Alex.
All right, so the BreakBread magazine right now is open for submissions through September 1st. We're excited to read your work, and we'd love for you guys to send us your poetry, fiction, art, and nonfiction. Mia's posting the link for submissions in the chat. And before we get started, we'd like to hear from you. So please type your first name, preferred pronouns, and hometown in the chat.
And Mia will go over housekeeping.
I apologize, everyone. It's
Oh, hey, Mia, you're breaking up. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in because it's actually kind of freezing on you. So we don't have very many housekeeping requests. It's just the usual stuff. Please remember to mute your mic unless you're the one talking. Private chat is turned off. So if you post something, we are all going to be able to see it. So you'll want to be comfortable with that and thinking about what you post. We love it when you clap, smile, cheer, and ask questions during the workshop. And if you don't want to be seen because it scares you when you're writing, please turn your camera off. Because the meeting is being recorded, and that will keep you from being recorded along with everything else. Thanks, everybody. And now I will, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Crystal A.C. Salas. Crystal is a Chicanics poet, essayist, educator, and community organizer. Her work has appeared in Northwest Review, Pank Magazine, Chaparral Poetry, the Acentos Review, Inscape Magazine, and others. She had just completed actually her MFA in poetry at UC Riverside, so let's give her some snaps because that is a big accomplishment. And there she provides arts and storytelling outreach as a Gluck Fellow and as an Along the Chaparral Fellow. She is accidentally working on 2 manuscripts, so hopefully we'll get to hear about those later today. And she is also the best cat mom in the whole wide world. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Crystal.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me. I am joined today by my neighbor's construction, so I hope that doesn't interfere too much, and my sleeping cat son, who's behind this computer screen, knocked out, and I hope that he will stay asleep. Good, it's afternoon, I guess, for all of us. I want to start by acknowledging the space that we are all creating on. It's different for all of us. I happen to be creating and writing and learning and reading and breathing and being nourished on Tongva and Gabrielino land, the ancestral home of those first peoples. And I know that all of us are coming from different places, and but wherever we are in the United States, and most of the world, we are on Indigenous land, and living and creating on that land. And it's important to acknowledge that as we go through, receiving everything that inspires us. So thank you. I'd love to know from everybody before we get started, what kind of plant and element, or plant or element, by elements, that could be anything on your periodic table, or it could be the more like base elements like earth, wind, fire, that sort of, that understanding of elements, or a plant, like a type of plant that you feel connected to, or like you feel like an affinity for, or you feel like some sort of relation to. And if you want to put it in the chat, that'd be awesome. Oh, I love all of these. Yes. Bonsai is so so fascinating, right, Emma? Like, I mean, it's such an art form. And yeah, and you can have the biggest something that can end up being so big, just like right on your table next to you. Love lavender. Love to just put it in water and spray it everywhere, Mia. And then yes, the lily of the valley. Can you have that in your house, Alex, with your cats? Is that kind of lily?
I think the reason I know it is because in Breaking Bad, they have like that plant and they use it to, I don't know if this is spoilers, they use it to poison someone, but
right, because
it is a household plant. So
it is a household plant. Yeah, it's a beautiful plant. I love everything from Jamie Lynn's garden. I still use sage that she dried for me to this day in my cooking. So mine is the Reina de la Noche. It's like a night flowering cereus cactus, and the blooms only happen like once or twice a year, and then they're open for like a night or like a couple days, and then they're gone. They're gorgeous. Hi, Mridhula. Welcome. We're letting each other know our favorite element and or plant that we feel connected to. And you can let us know in the chat. So the reason I ask is the first, the sort of, hey, welcome. So the reason I'm asking about these things is because I want us to think about, as we enter this workshop, things that we're connected with, that we feel some sort of affinity for, that are outside of ourselves. And particularly, we're going to be thinking about inanimate objects today, or maybe animate, but not human, I guess. The theme of today's workshop is persona, writing from persona. And we'll be looking at a lot of really cool poems that I love, that do that, and do that in interesting ways. And then we'll be writing a bunch. So the first thing, in thinking about this element of nature, I am going to do a share screen here. And start with this poem. So this is called Witchgrass. It's by the poet Louise Gluck. Anyone familiar with Louise Gluck? One of my favorite things about Louise Gluck, or tidbits that I learned about her as a poet, is like, yeah, she's great. And I learned that she went through something like really traumatic and some great like loss, and then thought that she would never write again, really. And I think we've all been there, right? Where we like think, am I just not able to create anymore? But then she just took it to her garden, and she just kind of like took the pressure off writing, and then just like went into her garden and just like worked at her garden, was like with the plants, and then it healed her, like came back to her slowly. And I thought that was really inspiring, that you can that is part of writing too. Writing is not just being on the page and writing the words. That is a lot of it, but there's a lot of processes that go on outside of that. So I found that really, really reassuring. So this poem is called Witchgrass. I'm going to read it first, and then I'm going to ask for a volunteer, because I think all poems should be read at least twice. So here it goes. Something comes into the world unwelcome, calling disorder, disorder. If you hate me so much, don't bother to give me a name. Do you need one more slur in your language? Another way to blame, one tribe for everything? As we both know, if you worship one God, you only need one enemy. I'm not the enemy, only a ruse to ignore what you see happening right here in this bed, a little paradigm of failure. One of your precious flowers dies here almost every day, and you can't rest until you attack the cause, meaning whatever is left, whatever happens to be sturdier than your personal passion. It was not meant to last forever in the real world. But why admit that when you can go on doing what you always do, mourning and laying blame, always the two together? I don't need your praise to survive. I was here first, before you were here, before you ever planted a garden. And I'll be here when only the sun and the moon are left, and the sea and the wide field. I will constitute the field. Oh, I love this poem. We're going to talk about this poem. Can I have a volunteer to read this poem again to us, to gift that to us?
Don't be shy. Who wants to do it? Emma, please.
Emma's such a great reader. Yeah, thank you, Emma. Appreciate you.
Okay. Something comes into the world unwelcome, calling disorder, disorder. If you hate me so much, don't bother to give me a name. Do you need one more slur in your language? Another way to blame, one tribe for everything? As we both know, if you worship one God, you only need one enemy. I'm not the enemy, only a ruse to ignore what you see happening right here in this bed, a little paradigm of failure. One of your precious flowers dies here almost every day, and you can't rest until you attack the cause, meaning whatever is left, whatever happens to be sturdier than your personal passion. It was not meant to last forever in the real world. But why admit that when you can go on, doing what you always do, mourning and laying blame, always the two together? I don't need your praise to survive. I was here first, before you were here, before you ever planted a garden. And I'll be here when only the sun and moon are left, and the sea, and the wide field. I will constitute the field.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. Hi, Kendall. Welcome. Hi. So, what are some things? I have a couple questions about this poem, but I'd love to hear if there's just anything that you notice about it up front or admire about it, or a line or something that excites you particularly? And anyone can answer that, grown-ups included.
For me, actually, the last, I think line or stanza, from the "I don't need your praise" to the end, that was my favorite part of this. I feel like it tied the whole poem together really nicely, and it really just like hit it on the head, I feel like.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I love that part too. It's like a shot of I mean, the whole poem's very energetic and electric, but it is like this shot of like a voice, right? Like of strength, of insistence. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, the same for me. Something I also love is this direct address, and the use of that. Like, that's another way that this poem really like charges its emotions, you know. And there's this repetition of I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, you are this. And we feel the charge of that exchange, whoever it is receiving this and whoever it is this is coming from. Taking control of definitions. Yes, yes. So do we have any ideas about the voice that's being inhabited by this poem? What's the perspective of this poem, or what sort of what do we think, and why do we think?
I mean, for me, I get the feeling that this is someone speaking from their native land, kind of standing their ground and saying that I am not the problem here. This is my land. You came to my land, kind of.
Yeah. Yes. So this voice of fighting for the land around it, and is the witch grass the voice? Yes. I think that's one of the voices. Definitely, we see the title. It's the witch grass. What is witch grass? Anyone know?
It's like this very invasive species of like weed, I think, right?
Yeah, it's a weed. And it's a weed, and as only a poet knows, or any sort of writer, it's all in there's lots of weeds that this poet could have chosen, right? But witchgrass, and like witch has what kind of connotation to it? Who gets called a witch?
Women.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Mia, great. I see a connection between witchgrass and someone to their native land, and they both witchgrass and their field, and what we plant on today, literally and metaphorically. Can you make brooms out of it? Yeah, I think I maybe read that somewhere. It's like it's really tough. It's a tough weed, and to think that it's coming, this poem is completely coming from the perspective of a weed, right? And that's who the poet is speaking from. But are we just seeing like a patch of grass when we see this poem? When we read this poem, is it just like we just getting an idea of a patch of like weeds with like a mouth and like googly eyes? Is that like what's going on here?
You know, there's so many metaphors, right, for harvesting in
Mhm.
Christianity, and in like if you read through like all of the witch trials and stuff and everything,
Yeah.
like it's interesting, they're very often talking about separating like the wheat from the chaff, or pulling out Satan's weeds, and those weeds are people in those instances, right?
Yeah.
So like
Mhm.
same thing with this, anything that's not that, you know, I was really struck by the, if you have one God, you have only one enemy, right?
Yeah.
And so I felt like that was really sort of pushing against that sense that if it's not the dominant religion, then it's not a religion at all. It must be witchcraft.
Yes. And this misunderstanding of all things other, right? Like we don't like weeds because they eat up what we've determined as valuable and pretty, right? But this, yes, but this end, you know, I will constitute the field. You know, I'll be here when only the sun and the moon are left, the sea and the wide field. I will constitute the field. This reminds me of my 7th grade science teacher, Mrs. Vidraska, who's really intense. And I remember her saying, explaining to us like insects. And, you know, one day they're going to be all that's left. So you're scared of them now, but they're going to be the last one standing. And she's really intense about it. She's like, we will all be gone and it will just be them. They will be the last ones. And it just and it's like, it's kind of that also, same sort of mindset, right? Of like this ugly thing that we want nothing to do with, but like witchgrass will be there and will constitute the field. Yeah. So here we have the voice of witchgrass, but we also from that vessel, have the voice of people who have been displaced, ideas, ways of believing that have been displaced, disembodied, and also like the redemption of that, the you know, perseverance of that, the tenacity of that, and that's all from Witchgrass. And this poem excites me because I think it's a really great way, and I think the other poems we'll be looking at today are a really great way to see how we can embody something outside of ourselves to explore something about ourselves. And sometimes we need to like get out of ourselves, because that can be a really even if we think we know ourselves, it can be a really like confusing place. Not that it's not confusing to embody witchgrass, but it can really change your sense of limitation. So I have a prompt for you already, and here it is. So I want you to think about the moon. We put a lot on the moon. We put a lot on the moon. Oh, the moon's looking after us, and the moon sees this, and the moon is kind of what do we think about, like, what are some of our ideas about the moon in like pop culture? Like, what are the sort of lunar stereotypes, if you will?
Well, it's kind of like we're always talking about like corrupting the moon in a way. Like we have to do this lunar colonization and make it ours, like that constant look for power.
Yeah, yep. Goddess imagery, yep. So not only goddess, but like a feminine sort of like here to shine on you, controlling women's cycles. Yeah. Having a lot of like again, this goddess thing, like having this this superseding like control. She's always sort of coveted as a woman and like her beauty, so like sort of objectified, right? Like we're all just looking at the moon just like naked up there, right? And also we can colonize her. Yeah, purity. Yeah, so that's the moon gets a lot of that. Probably some other things where the sun is maybe more seen as more masculine, right? Like we have like the masculine and feminine. So I want you to think about that and how that exists in our culture. And here's your prompt. The moon wants to enact revenge on the planet Earth. Like as a neighbor, everything that the planet Earth has on it, think about what the planet Earth does as a neighbor to the rest of the solar system. Maybe she feels disrespected. Maybe she needs further space and feels like she's been looked at all the time. She feels maybe self-conscious from that. Whatever, maybe she doesn't. You have your own idea of the moon. What does she say? What does she want? Or they want? Maybe she's not a she, like we all think, maybe the moon is, I would have guessed that the moon is evolved past the gender binary. My goodness. Write this as a poem, but do not mention the word moon. So I would suggest probably to like a first person, maybe a second person I, or you can use the you as well. But you have to do all this without mentioning the word moon. I'm going to give us about, let's do 12 minutes and I'll check in with you. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so feel free, you can turn off your camera so you can have writing time. I will, so 12:30, or sorry, it's PST for me. So it would be 42, 3:42 where you're at. All right, see you in a bit. Happy writing. Okay, you have about a minute left to be the moon. All right, begin to wrap up your moon thoughts or pause them. Would anyone like to share what they learned from the moon? Even an excerpt or whatever you'd like. Anyone online? Yeah, awesome, Kendall. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like my thing is like in progress right now, so it's like really messy, but I can definitely share like my thoughts on everything.
Yeah.
I feel like I really leaned into that exploitation sort of vibe. Like the more I got into it, the more it became like this direct address, like talking about like how we crack into everything and rip it open. And I got kind of visceral, I guess.
Good. Could you read one line for us?
Sure. Let me see which one is good to do. Let me see. Can we look at every glowing silhouette and own it? She must be smiling and wanting her body cracked open like everyone else. Yeah.
Ooh. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Kendall. Yeah, I love that anger. And oh, Mia said I learned the moon is snarky and is fed up and knows her worth. Fantastic. Anyone else learn something new about the moon? Okay, so and if you're typing part of it in the chat, that's awesome too. I'd love to appreciate it from there. Yeah, so I think this is a great exercise to think about writing from a persona as writing from, not writing for. And this idea of like, we're not writing to speak for something or someone with a pre-prescribed notion of what they have to say, but more writing to as a means of speaking from, as a means of curiosity, as a means of being open to what that voice is going to reveal to us that we like sat there. I think the best poems are often the poems, especially that excite me the most, are when I'm writing and my own writing surprises me, right? Have you ever been in that situation where you're like, oh, I felt that way, or that's how it is, you know? That's the best. That's like I wish you could bottle that up and drink it, you know, like that's the best feeling where you're really communing with the universe, you know, to yeah, so that's what a persona poem can unlock for you. I want to show you another thing I learned about that I've learned about persona poems from the great Appalachian writer Frank X. Walker. the author of The Unghosting of Medgar Evers and a lot of other books, but he is like a master of persona poetry. And he once said to write, yeah, Jamie Lynn would know, to write in persona, you need three things. This helped me understand so much this this art form of escaping yourself, which is not something we always think about in poetry, right? We think that's like the fiction writer's job, but like we can do it too. So to write in persona, you need three things: memory, research, and imagination. And that's what you need to be like orbiting this writing around. And to that, I ask you, like, we have to have an idea of what is truth and what is authenticity. What do you think's the difference? Truth versus authenticity.
To me, I feel like authenticity is being truthful to yourself, while truth is, might just be what is, but like if you're authentic, then you're taking it further and describing how you perceive that truth, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Thank you, Emma. Anyone have anything to add to that? Yeah, I agree. Alex, truth sounds more literal while authenticity can be more figurative. Yeah, like truth can be thought of as facts, right? Like these are the facts. A great writing teacher of mine told me that you have to decide when you're going to be an artist, authenticity, and when you're going to be a stenographer, which is that person who types down exactly what was said in court, and you need the exact accuracy there. That's not to say we have to throw out one entirely for the other, but having this idea of where we're being, going for fact and where we're going for authenticity, and where those are meeting and where those are separate. And that changes by the poem. But yeah, like embodying the experience and the true to yourselfness, or the true to humanity-ness of it, as Emma said way more beautifully. And then, what the actual like facts of the matter are. And if you're writing from, a historical perspective, with Frank X. Walker, this whole book of persona poems from the this unghosting of Medgar Evers, it's your responsibility to be super factual, because you are bringing and also authentic, but you do have to do your research about what you don't know to bring forth, this person who did live and exist, and not misrepresent them, right? But also knowing that you're not going to ever get the full thing because you can't talk to them, right? And you aren't them. And there's that balance, and it's the idea of just knowing that exists and treading with that in mind. And that's how we try our best to be respectful. But then there's lots of other things, like witchgrass. Like we can't literally talk to witchgrass, but we figuratively can, right? Yeah, so that's all to say, just keep that balance in mind. Is a really helpful way to write these persona poems. I want to share with you a poem by a former student of mine. Her name is not the all new Google Pixel 5.8, if you could hear that. It's her name's Mila Kuda. And this poem she wrote, she's much older than this now. She's probably, I think she's like 21, 22 now, but this was written when she was a high school student. Still very proud of this poem. And it's from Van Gogh's Severed Ear. And that is like the persona that she took on. So I'm just going to go through ask you to enjoy this.
From Van Gogh's Severed Ear. The blade wasn't meant for me, not at first, but the other man in the room. Another artist like my own, their conversations full of tropical landscapes and lemonade paint. I could never see the art, but it sounded so beautiful. Until their voices raised. Like two glasses of wine held high for a toast, they clashed, cracked, stained everything. Van Gogh, with the razor ready, with each thought tiptoeing a tightrope between mood swings and memory loss. What else was he to do but slice me like an apple, feed me to the lonesome woman of the brothel? Maybe he wanted to cut the voices out. I don't blame him. The mind of a tortured artist is one we worship for its struggle and judge for its suffering. I hear he went to the hospital after that. I hear he finally got the voices to stop, but I didn't get the chance to hear the gunshot.
I mean, right? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Oh my gosh. Ads. Hold on. Autoplay. Dang. Okay. So, yeah, that poem still blows my mind years later. Yeah. So what do we know about Van Gogh? Like, what's the background that we like is kind of common knowledge about Van Gogh?
Well, I mean, there's the stories, you know, about like, and I'm always fascinated with the way so many people have written poems about him,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm thinking of Cesla.
Milosh.
Yes. I love that poem in particular. But, you know, of course, the thing he's probably most known for is cutting off his ear. And I think he sent it to a woman.
Yeah. An ex-lover, I think. Yeah. And it was later understood, I think, you know, they didn't have the knowledge around the time that he suffered from bipolar disorder, you know, and as she said, you know, this the mind of a tortured artist is the one that we love for its suffering and hate for what, you know, what the actual experience is. And yes, very romantic. And so you can see, right, how she wrote from knowing, Mila wrote from what she knew about Van Gogh, what she researched about Van Gogh, you know, about his art, about why he cut his ear off, you know, but also she extended from that, right? There's no interviewing Van Gogh about, you know, how do you feel about struggling with mental illness? You know, they didn't even know that at the time, but he was just seen as a tortured artist and seen as crazy, right? And it's a very limited perspective of like this man who was very complex, as we all are. And she used that memory and that research to create some imagination, right? To extend that and say something beyond. And obviously we cannot interview his ear, right? But she, why write from his ear? Why, what do you think? Like the choice to write from his ear instead of, I don't know, just him, you know, letter from Van Gogh. What does that vessel offer?
Well, she was like definitely able to play more around with like the human body, and like I could like she made some things about like hearing, like different parts of lines that involve the word hear, and she would put them in different interpretations. Pretty.
So it offers this extended metaphor, right? For hearing, hearing, being heard, listening, and of course it sets us up. He did, you know, he unfortunately Van Gogh committed suicide, you know, which eventually ended his life, and that ear is, you know, without glamorizing it. I think that's a really hard thing that can be really hard to do, right? Is to not sort of glamorize that, but it really it amplifies the pain of it, you know, and we're really seeing the story behind the story through his ear. And I'm still amazed that like every poem I ever write will still be trying to rise to the level of that poem. Okay, which is truly the reason why I teach, is just to be around better writers than myself. So I want to move on to, I know we're, just for the sake of time, I very much got too excited about this idea, and I gathered too many poems. So I will give you this document, and if you're interested in persona poems, you can read more of these on your own. I'm going to go through a few of these just to give you some ideas, and then we'll close with a little more writing. So I wish we could talk about these at more length. Yes, I absolutely will, Jamie Lynn. But we'll just kind of be reading them, kind of enjoying them like a poetry reading, and just taking them in, and just thinking about, also, I want you to be thinking about how research is working, how imagination is working, how memory is working, this idea between truth, of truth versus authenticity, or truth and authenticity. This first poem, or this next poem, is by one of my favorite poets in the whole world, Lucille Clifton. This is actually like a compendium of a lot of works of hers, but she actually wrote a whole book called Voices that is just persona poetry. And I tell everyone, if you want to know about embodying, if you want to know about writing about your dreams, there's so much to learn from Lucille Clifton, and I love her so much. Yes, Kendall, thank you. Oh, she's the best. So this is called Aunt Jemima, which we can probably guess the perspective here just from the title. White folks say I remind them of home. I, who have been homeless all my life, except for their kitchen cabinets. I, who have made the best of everything, pancakes, batter for chicken, my life, the shelf on which I sit between flour and cornmeal, is thick with dreams. Oh, how I long for my own syrup, rich as blood, my true nephews, my nieces, my kitchen, my family, my home. Oof. So we're speaking from here, the Aunt Jemima syrup bottle that we all know, right? But Aunt Jemima is not just a brand of syrup, right? What else do we know as American citizens, as global citizens? What do we know of Aunt Jemima?
She's one of those products that is so, like, just grossly stereotypical that it's an insult. You know, like, I mean, it's really bad. So
Yeah.
if someone calls someone that, I mean, it's on. So it just, like,
Yeah,
it's so deeply hurtful, you know, inappropriate.
Yeah.
It's like a super duper like racist like caricature of a Black woman, and like stemming from times of slavery. So it's like just
Who's here to serve, and is so here to serve you that she embodies, like, the syrup bottle's changed now, but it used to be like the shape of a woman and the syrup pouring, you know, like, how messed up, but like that up until very recently was like the branding, you know. So speaking from the product itself, but also as was mentioned earlier, like Aunt Jemima was a caricature of like a larger experience, right? The female African American experience, and so she's speaking, Lucille Clifton, through this poem, right? giving the syrup bottle a voice, but through that is also giving a greater erased legacy a voice, right? And I know you're all very very, very intelligent, and I don't need to even tell you that my own syrup rich as blood. That's not, I mean, it's literal and then it's not, right? We're suddenly moving to this whole family. And I just, the enjambment, the spacing, my family, how that's broken away from the rest of the stanza. It's just, this isn't a class where we're really talking about form, but I can't not look at Lucille Clifton's poetry without just like worshiping every single part of it. Okay, I have 2 more poems I want to read to you just to get an idea. This poem is called Mummified Bird by Richie Hoffman, who is actually teaching a workshop for BreakBread in a month or 2. It's on the schedule. This is from the perspective of a mummified bird that was like buried with a pharaoh. And I really love this poem for the research. The pharaoh who loved me died. They put his body in oil and linen. In life, he called me pretty birdie. I pulled dead feathers from my side for him. I practiced holding his finger. We both were chosen from among our kind. He sent slaves to a room they never came back from, and once a wife he didn't love. I love the marble shape of him, packed with fragrant herbs. Priests attended my cage like doting women. Then a man put his hands on my head, and I felt the air no longer. He barely touched me. I was so breakable. The cats were mute, like death. The jackal-headed man held my heart. Does the earth belong to him now? If there is a soul, I don't think it can let go of such splendor. His silent mouth, his brain, like mine, outside of him, though he walks now in another place, in another perfect body, with a new wife to love him. Yeah. So, any sort of remarks on this poem or things that stand out to you? What's the energy of the thing here? What sort of authenticity are we learning about the emotional truth of this? What are some of the emotional truths of this piece? Or how does it make you feel? Is another way to ask that.
The line, I'm not sure if I'm like saying it exactly right, but I was not ready to let my soul go, or if there is a soul, I don't think it can let go of such splendor. That I think was my favorite part. It just like, I feel like it conveyed all of this like love for the, like Alex said it right. Yeah, it's so tender.
Yeah. And in its submission, yeah, I like that word too. So another thing I love about this poem is, I think just like the Aunt Jemima poem and just like the Witchgrass poem, and maybe all the poems that we've read so far, is this voice, this discovery of voice from an artifact that is wildly unconsidered, right? That's sort of just sitting on the shelf or here, like it's this thing that was this animal that was killed for the purpose of, was bred and killed for the purpose of being mummified, right? And that's the trajectory of the life, and like who considers that perspective, right? And we get to do that as poets, which is just so exciting. Okay, one more so we can get some more writing in. This is from, anyone know Patricia Smith? Patricia Smith. Yes, I know Alex knows Patricia Smith. I think I remember Alex seeing Patricia Smith live and like losing herself. It was amazing. This is Blood Dazzler, and it's one of her collections of poems, and she wrote it. Oh, great. Yeah, Patricia Smith, love in the house. So you have to hear her read her stuff out loud. She is just bone chilling, but she wrote this entire collection from the perspective of Hurricane Katrina, and can, also be connected to lots of other hurricanes that have existed, but Hurricane Katrina, as well as all of the structural inequality, the racial inequality, the ecological disaster of it, which is also, ends up being like having huge racial inequality as well. And so I highly, highly recommend this book. But this is one of the poems that she wrote from the perspective of Hurricane Katrina, 7 p.m. Thursday, August 25th, 2005. Hurricane Katrina makes landfall in Florida. I see what this language does and taste soil on my tongue and feel brick splintering spine and hear them and want it all. What are some things we notice about this poem and this perspective, or this way of accessing a perspective? Yeah. Because how dare we limit a hurricane, a whole dang hurricane, Mother Nature, to one poem, right? To one voice. So much economy in these few words. Yes, it's all encompassing. I think I want to go back to what I think somebody said earlier in the chat, which was, oh yeah, Alex said with witchgrass, it sounds like it's coming from something organic and grand. And I think that's happening here too. We have this very, very tiny poem, but we have the grandness of a hurricane, and a hurricane is one of the hugest natural events, natural disasters like that cannot be stopped. There's really nothing humans who think we're in control of everything, there's nothing we can do about something like this except try to prevent it, with, addressing climate change and all that. But once it's there, that's it, right? And she gets that. Yes, you understand the magnitude with so few. Okay, so I have some more Katrina poems because this is full of so much genius. So I will leave that with you so you can read it on your own. But I have another prompt, and then I have a prompt for you to take with you. But we'll do a couple minutes, before we end today, and then I'll give you a little homework prompt if you wish. So here we go. This is an organic prop scavenger hunt. An organic prop is something that has any sort of item that has emotional meaning to it. That if you ever have an item that you have a hard time throwing out because like it has a memory attached to it. These exist all around us, right? Like this glass is just a glass. Like it's so boring. It's from IKEA, but I think if it broke, I might be like a little sad. I'm a little overly sentimental, but It's like a glass that I bought with my partner when we moved in together at IKEA, you know, and like one of the first things we owned together. You know, so like it has a little bit of meaning attached to it. But we have all these things around us that have some sort of meaning beyond it. It's never just a plate, you know, it's never just a coffee cup. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times, especially when you're a poet, it isn't. So I want you to think about some artifacts in your home that have personal and historical significance to you. Better if there's some mystery attached to them. So maybe it's something you inherited or you don't know where it came from. That works too. So I want you, we're just going to do this all in one. We're going to do about 10 minutes and then we'll wrap up. So I want you to think of those items and to write from the perspective of one of those artifacts. What has this artifact witnessed in its life in your home or before your home? How has it encountered fear or joy or delight or shame or confusion or wonder? A bonus challenge is to find one item and write a letter from it to another item. So for example, you know, one thing that's cluttered under your bed to another thing that's cluttered and forgotten under your bed. What do those two folks have to say to each other? All right. Any questions? Okay, 10 minutes. I know it's short, but it's a start. It's a burst. And then it's something to take with you. Okay, so you can go ahead and write. I'll bring you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, take about 1 more minute. And this isn't the end, this is just the beginning. Okay. So before I ask my next question, which I think you might know what I'm going to ask, but I want us to remember one really important thing. We all had 10 minutes. 10 minutes is not that much time. We had 10 minutes. Everybody had 10 minutes. First drafts are just discovery drafts, and so this is really a place to just kind of share discovery. It's not a talent show, it's a like, wow, look what I found or like learned from my organic prop. So with that, would anyone like to share what they wrote, or a little part of it, or maybe just talk about it? I'd love to hear some language before we end today.
I can give it a shot. So I chose to write from the perspective of the pen that I wrote my diary with. So here it goes. You picked me up one day, out of despair, out of hope, out of a need to transcribe something so authentic sound cannot convey. I greeted paper with haste, dancing across, wet, dry. Pain, hate, joy spilled. Silently, I screamed all that you could not say. And that's where I left off.
Oh, I love this pull between, it started in the something so authentic sound cannot convey, but it's like continued throughout with like screaming into the paper, this idea of the loudness of the silence of the page. So cool. Thank you, Emma. Anyone else?
Crystal, could they put it in the chat? Like if they don't
Absolutely.
read it, would that be all right?
Of course. If anyone wants to put a little line or a thought about what they wrote, that's welcome too.
I could read mine.
Yay.
It was from this like pink plastic tiara in my attic, which I actually used to like, it was like for this school project where we were like doing a movie about the Canterbury Tales. It was that. I can't remember if I was a gift from Caitlin to you or a gift from you to Caitlin. Either way, I ended up here. Half an arm, chipped rhinestones. I was made for a child. And maybe that's what I got out of this. For what's so different between deathlessness and infancy. I knew my stagnancy here would not be cruel. I was born in your hands in that dollar store to be a memory. I only ask that chipped and useless here I am remembered. For only rich things tarnish, cheap things just break.
Ooh. Oh, like that was a punch. That was a sucker punch line. Only rich things tarnish, cheap things just break. Wow. Thank you for, again, like another great example. Both Emma and Alex, a beautiful example of like, all the things around us, like broken, your pen that I'd never keep a pen the whole time. I lose it at some point, a tiara that's broken and like in the attic, like they have, because we are poets, we get to tell their stories, like most people see that as trash And, you know, it could be, but also we have this ability to just imbue life, you know, that also tells us more about us maybe than it does about the item. So thank you, thank you. Okay, any last folks want to share? Yeah, Kendall, awesome.
So I chose, it's a little bit darker, but I chose like sheets because when I was younger, I used to really struggle with eczema. And so like it would leave my sheets all bloody and it was a mess. But so this is just like a little bit, but you are torn between the lines of reasoning and irrationality, restraint and destruction all over your skin, wanting that red wine dripping from your thighs like organic rubies, staining us in the color of, and then, yeah.
Wow. So again, so visceral, you know, and like what a, like again, I'm just like so amazed by the things that we chose to write perspectives from. Like those sheets have seen a lot, and yeah, the organic rubies, it's super memorable. Thank you, Kendall. Okay, so before I wrap up here, I will give you this this document, but I want to share with you a prompt for the road. And these prompts can also, you know, you can keep writing on these, and I'd love to see them. I work with all of you in some capacity, so if you want to send me what you wrote, I'd love to see it. So this is your prompt for the road. Think of a historical event or artifact that has always been interesting to you, or perhaps even had a draw of mystery to it. Again, for these purposes, I define history as always happening around us. So historical event, person, artifact can be, you know, it doesn't have to be the distant past. It can be yesterday, you know. Write down what questions you are, do some research on the selection, write down what's most interesting and surprising to you, what leaves you with questions, and then think about what this person, place, or thing has witnessed through the course of a specific event or period that you found through your research. How are they, or it, if we're personifying an object or a place, changed by what happened? What do they know before? What did they know before, and what do they know now? And what slivers of perspective, which all of you have already touched on, these lost and unseen slivers of perspective. What can you come back with, you know, once you have that conversation with this item or with this person? Yeah, remember memory, research, and imagination. And I'd love to see what you come up with. This one takes a little bit more time, so I leave that to you as your for the road prompt. But yeah, I thank you so much for sharing your work with me, for reading these poems along with me. And I hope that you continue to write from, use that as another vessel, you know, of your work to write from personas. It can be really empowering. So thank you, everyone.
Crystal, thank you. I know it's so hard to clap on Zoom and it like makes terrible noises. It sounds like construction everywhere, but thank you so much. This has been like absolutely terrific, and we're really grateful that you could be here. For those of you who are interested, you can also follow Crystal on social media and read more of her work. Mia's posting the links in the chat right now. And don't leave just yet, because we have a few exciting announcements about stuff that's coming up. Mia is up next. And just in case she's having trouble with audio, Mia, if you need to cut me off, go ahead. I just asked her to say that we launched the first issue of BreakBread magazine online back in February. You can see it at the link that Alex is posting in the chat. And we also have copies available for sale of our first print issue. So you can get those via Venmo or on Submittable. Visit the website for more information. And those magazine sales help us to kind of like finance the next print run of BreakBread magazine, which is coming up. So if you can afford to support our work, then please, like, we appreciate everyone who does that. And I'll turn things over to Alex.
So we also have a limited number of magazines reserved for low-income creatives. So if you can't afford the magazine, we offer free or pay what you want for pay what you can for the magazine. So please email Jamie Lynn. Mia's gonna post her email in the chat, and it's like a no questions asked kind of thing. Yeah, and back to Jamie Lynn.
Thanks so much, Alex. Our next Creative Classroom workshop is going to be terrific. We have essayist Claire Myrie with us. And Claire is actually a former student of mine and just graduated from college, just headed to graduate school. And she is going to lead us through a workshop on Gen Z nonfiction. So it should be pretty exciting. If you've never written about your life or you feel like you haven't lived enough, that's not true. That's not true. So we want to help you write about it and see where that takes you. So Mia is posting the link to that in the chat, and I'll cover for her next talking bit because I think there's some connectivity issues. So if you enjoyed today's workshop, please help us spread the word by following us on social media. And Alex is putting those links in the chat. And I want to give a huge shout out to Alex and to Mia for stepping in today to help. They're coordinating all this Zoom magic and making it happen. Another big thank you to Crystal for this like absolutely amazing workshop. So great, so great. And thanks again to BreakBread Literacy Project. Thanks from the Public Library of Mount Vernon in Knox County. We're really excited to host these for you.
Thank you all, and the library's closed.
So thanks again to the Public Library of Mount Vernon, Knox County, Ohio, for hosting the BreakBread workshops as a part of our teen writing program. The public library online programs are accessible anywhere, anytime, and we love having visitors join us via knox.net and our extremely cool YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining us. Happy writing, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.